I wasn't supposed to be home that afternoon. My flight from LA landed a few hours ahead of schedule, and instead of heading to the studio like I told Jenna I would, I made a split-second decision. I was going to surprise her. We hadn't really connected in weeks. Not since, well, honestly, not since before that weekend trip she took to San Antonio with her team. Something had shifted since then. She came back different, quieter, maybe, but also somehow distracted. I chalked it up to stress. We were both working a lot, both busy. Or so I thought. The Uber dropped me off a block away. I didn't want her to see me coming. I even left my bag in the back seat and told the driver I'd tip double if he circled around and came back in 10 minutes. I figured I'd sneak in, find her in the kitchen, kiss the side of her neck like I used to, and maybe we'd cook together like old times. Corny, sure, but I missed that version of us. I unlocked the front door as quietly as I could and stepped inside. The house was quiet but not empty. I could hear running water upstairs, steady, like someone was in the shower. I smiled a little, imagining her reaction when she saw me. Maybe this was exactly what we needed. A surprise. A moment. I started up the stairs, trying not to creak the steps. That's when I saw it right there on the floor just outside our bedroom door. A men's shirt. At first, I thought maybe it was one of mine. It was wrinkled and half-crumpled like it had been peeled off in a rush. Light blue, button-down, some kind of thin summer fabric. But something about it stopped me cold. It wasn't mine. I crouched down and picked it up. The brand tag said Axiom Tailors. Never heard of it. It didn't smell like me either. Not like my usual cedarwood cologne. This one was sharper, citrusy, but heavy. Masculine. It lingered on the fabric in a way that made my stomach twist. I stood there for what felt like a full minute, holding it between my fingers, trying to rationalize. My mind ran through explanations, each more ridiculous than the last. Maybe it was her dad's? No, he hadn't visited in months. Maybe something from the donation pile? A thrift store find? A set piece for a photo shoot? Or maybe it belonged to someone she didn't expect me to meet. The bathroom door creaked open behind me and I instinctively dropped the shirt behind my leg. Oh my God, Trevor? You're home early, Jenna said, startled but smiling, wrapped in one of her plush white towels, her wet hair tucked up in a messy bun. Yeah. Flight got in ahead of schedule, I replied, watching her carefully. There was a beat, just a fraction too long, where her eyes flicked down toward the floor where the shirt had been. I brought it into view and held it up. This yours? I asked, doing my best to sound neutral. She let out a small laugh, too forced, and stepped out of the bathroom, avoiding my eyes. Oh, that's my brother's. He came by earlier. Dropped something off, I think he left that behind. He was rushing to catch a flight. You know how he is. Her voice was breezy, light, too light. I said. Her brother lives in Houston. That's 3 hours away. And last I checked, he wasn't dropping by unannounced on weekday afternoons. Still, I didn't say any of that. I just stood there, shirt still in hand, watching her dry her arms with the towel like none of this was weird. She moved toward the closet and started rifling through hangers like this was a completely normal conversation. Want Thai tonight? She asked, glancing at me over her shoulder. I'm kind of craving that ginger chicken you like. Sure, I said, my voice thinner than I intended. And that was it. No follow-up. No further questions from me. Just silence and doubt. The rest of the evening played out like any other. Jenna acted normal, almost overly so. She told me about her day, asked how the studio meeting went, laughed at something on TV a little louder than usual. I nodded along, responding when needed. But inside, I was elsewhere, spiraling through memory fragments, recalibrating everything I thought I knew. Because once you see a puzzle piece that doesn't fit, you start looking for all the other ones. The thing is, I used to be the kind of guy who didn't question much. I trusted her. We were solid, or at least I thought we were. We'd been together 6 years, married 3. Jenna was my person. The one who brought me snacks in the studio when I lost track of time. The one who used to text me lyrics at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. The one I imagined having kids with even though we always said someday. But now, that shirt was sitting in my mind like an oil spill. No matter how I tried to clean around it, the mess had already soaked in. She said it was her brother's. Maybe it was. Maybe I was reading into nothing. But then why had she shifted the subject so fast? Why hadn't she texted me about him stopping by? It wasn't the shirt itself that got to me. It was the way she handled it. Dismissive. Light. Careful. Like she'd practiced that answer. I sat on the couch with her that night while she scrolled through Instagram reels and chuckled at some video of a dog in sunglasses. She leaned against me just like she always did. Her hand found mine, fingers laced out of habit. And still, I couldn't stop seeing that shirt in my mind. Light blue, citrus scent, someone else's collar, someone else's presence in my house. I didn't mention it again. Not that night, not the next day, but from that moment forward, something changed in me. A door I didn't know existed had opened, and I had stepped through it. That night I couldn't sleep. Jenna was lying next to me, her breathing soft and steady, curled on her side like she always did. But I wasn't there with her, not mentally. I was somewhere between memory and madness, staring at the ceiling like it had answers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that damn shirt, wrinkled, careless, like the guy who wore it had been too comfortable, too familiar, too sure he wouldn't be caught. At 2:17 a.m., I got up, went downstairs, and sat on the edge of the couch in the dark. The house felt hollow, too quiet, like it was trying to whisper something to me if I'd only listened close enough. And I did. I listened to everything I'd missed in the last few months. Jenna's behavior hadn't changed overnight, and now that I was really looking at it, really dissecting it, it was obvious something had been off for a while. I just hadn't wanted to see it. Started with her phone. It used to live on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, on the bathroom sink. She never cared who saw it. Now, it was practically glued to her hand. Face down when she wasn't using it. Set to silent. She used to plug it in at night on her nightstand. Lately, she started charging it downstairs or in her purse. She told me it was because the notifications were disrupting her sleep. But they never used to. Then there was work. Jenna had always been a hard worker, type A to her core, but she used to leave the office around 6 and be home by 7. Recently, 9 o'clock was normal. Sometimes later. Meetings ran long. Had to stay for a last-minute strategy session. Wine with the team. And I believed it, because that's what you do when you love someone. You believe them, even when they stop making sense. And God, the distance. Not just physical, though that too. Fewer touches. Fewer kisses. When I reached for her in bed, sometimes she'd flinch like my hands startled her. She used to kiss me mid-sentence just because. Now it felt like I had to ask for her attention. But the worst thing, the thing that hit me like a punch in the chest, was her secret Instagram account. She had one under her maiden name. I stumbled on it by accident a couple months back when I typed her name into a search bar on my old backup phone. There she was at Jenna Calhoun. Private profile. No mutual followers. Nothing tied to her main account. When I asked her about it, she got weird. Laughed too loud. Said it was just something for an old college project. I didn't push it because I didn't want to be that guy. The jealous, insecure husband. God, how stupid does that sound now? Even her friends had changed. Her closest one, Mallory. The one who used to come over every other weekend and bring that awful hummus from Whole Foods, hadn't shown up in months. And when I asked about her, Jenna brushed it off. She's been going through stuff, she said. She's not really in a social mood. But what if she just didn't want to look me in the eye? What if she knew? I leaned forward on the couch, elbows on my knees, hands laced tight, like I was holding myself together with nothing but grip strength. And I sat like that for hours going over it all. Every moment, every excuse, every red flag I had ignored, minimized, explained away. I could see it now, a web of tiny cracks in the foundation I thought was solid. And suddenly, things that never made sense were snapping into place like puzzle pieces. There was that weekend she went to a conference in Dallas but posted no pictures, didn't call once, and came back with a sunburn and a hotel shampoo bottle in her purse. She said the hotel didn't have great Wi-Fi, and her phone died. I believed her. Who doesn't forget a charger, right? Or the night she came home wearing different earrings than she left with. I noticed, made a dumb joke. Swapping styles mid-date? And she laughed it off, said she found one in her glove compartment and decided to change. At the time, it sounded weird. But I let it go. She always had a story, and I always let her tell it. I don't know if it was trust or just denial. At some point, I started blaming myself, telling myself I'd been too busy with the studio, that maybe I'd neglected her, that maybe, in some twisted way, I deserved it. That line of thinking is poison. It seeps into your bloodstream before you even realize it. But sitting there on that couch, I made myself stop. Because even if I hadn't been perfect, even if I had missed things or been distracted by work, I never betrayed her. I never gave my heart to someone else. I never brought another person into our house. And I sure as hell never left a stranger's shirt on our bedroom floor. I didn't go back to bed that night. I just sat there reliving things I had already lived, now colored with suspicion and clarity I didn't ask for. By the time the sun rose, I'd made a decision, not a loud one, not dramatic. Just quiet, steady. I wasn't going to ask her anything. I wasn't going to accuse. I wasn't going to blow up our lives on a hunch. I was going to wait. Watch. Listen. And when the truth revealed itself, and I was sure it would, I'd be ready. Waiting was harder than I thought it'd be. Every day felt like a quiet test of endurance, me pretending to live normally, pretending to eat and sleep and work while underneath it all I was sinking. But I didn't let it show. Jenna carried on as if nothing was wrong, smiling when she passed me in the hallway, pecking my cheek before heading off to work like she hadn't detonated something in her home. And I played along. Smiled back. Asked about her meetings. Told her I loved her before bed. But every moment was surveillance. I started noticing the patterns more clearly now that I was actually looking. She used the same two phrases when texting someone, will do, smiley face, and be there in 10. Neither of those ever showed up in texts with me. Her phone habits had become almost ritualistic, always with her, even in the bathroom, always tilted away from me, and when she thought I wasn't looking, she'd swipe down to clear previews or mute notifications entirely. So I decided to stop guessing. I've always been decent with tech, comes with the job. One night, while Jenna was brushing her teeth, I slid her laptop out of her bag. She rarely used it in front of me, which was strange for someone who once edited wedding photos as a side hustle. It took less than 5 minutes to get what I needed. I slipped in a flash drive with discrete tracking software, hidden behind a dummy update screen. By the time she came out, I was back in bed, scrolling through an old Reddit thread like nothing had happened. For 2 days, I got nothing but routine. Grocery lists, Pinterest boards, unread promotional emails. Then came the inbox. There was a folder buried deep inside a Gmail label called Archive Event Planning. The irony. Inside were dozens of threads, all labeled with vague subject lines like budget proposal and follow-up decks. But the messages weren't about budgets or decks. They were personal. An asterisk mate. Full of inside jokes, references to places I'd never been, and language that stopped my breath cold. The man's name was Jason Barth. The first message I opened was almost polite, just her thanking him for coffee. But by the third, they were talking about hotel reservations. So glad you booked the same suite. Can't wait to be wrapped up in those stupid overpriced robes with you again, she wrote. I felt the back of my neck heat up like I'd been caught in a fire. I read more than I should have. Some part of me needed to absorb the full weight of it. There were travel plans. Photos. Private jokes about me, references to how he's always in his own world or never notices anything outside that soundproof studio. That one hit me hard. The same studio where I once taught Jenna how to mix vocals. The same place we drank wine on the floor and built playlists for our wedding reception. But nothing hit harder than the photo. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't even especially romantic. But it was unmistakable. Jason and Jenna. On our couch. In front of the fireplace. She was leaning into him wearing the green cardigan she swore she lost last fall. His hand was around her waist. A half-empty bottle of red wine on the table. My table. My fireplace. My life. The metadata said it was taken 6 weeks ago. That night, she told me she was in Dallas for a work thing. I even remembered texting her that night because the power went out briefly from a storm. She said, "Wish I was there to light candles with you." She was 5 feet away from that fireplace when she sent that. I slammed the laptop shut and pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes until my vision went black. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even curse. I just sat there for a long time, feeling like my chest had been pried open and hollowed out. When I could finally move again, I transferred everything, every message, every photo, every scrap, onto a private drive and encrypted it. Then I created a folder labeled just in case and backed it up twice. One on a cloud server. One on a hard drive I slid into a case and shoved under the floorboard in the studio closet, taped to the bottom like contraband. Because the thing about knowing is, once you know, there's no turning back. The next few days were a fog. Jenna was still being Jenna. Maybe even more affectionate. I noticed she started making coffee for me in the mornings again, a habit she dropped months ago. She even mentioned planning a weekend trip for the two of us, some cabin Airbnb near Blanco she'd found with a hot tub and no Wi-Fi. I almost laughed. It was like watching someone decorate a house that was already on fire. I kept calm. Friendly, but distant. And I started preparing for war. I hired an attorney quietly, carefully. His name was Brenton Colby. Straight shooter. Recommended by a friend from the Austin tech scene who'd gone through a messy split the year before. I told him I wasn't ready to file. Not yet. I just wanted to understand my options and make sure I didn't get blindsided when the time came. Brenton was good. Too good, maybe. By the time I left his office, he'd already mapped out a rough strategy and given me a list of things to collect. Bank statements, property documents, evidence, communication logs, anything Jenna might try to manipulate. She's already lying to you, he said calmly. So assume she's prepared to lie to the court. I didn't want to believe it. But then again, I didn't want to believe a lot of things. Later that night, I sat in bed next to Jenna while she watched a true crime documentary on her iPad. I remember she reached over and rubbed the back of my neck the way she used to during our first year together. A small, tender gesture. I almost closed my eyes and let myself fall back into it. But then I remembered Jason's arm around her in our living room. And I pulled away. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. She must have known something was coming. Maybe it was the way I stopped answering her texts right away, or how I no longer lingered in doorways when she left for work. Maybe it was the way I looked at her, no longer searching for affection but for evidence. I gave her the chance to come clean. Every day I didn't say a word was a chance. And she never took it. It happened on a Sunday. The kind of quiet, overcast day that should have meant coffee, vinyl records, and staying in pajamas till 3. Instead, it became the day everything exploded. We were in the kitchen. She was at the sink rinsing berries, blueberries, her favorite. I was leaning against the counter pretending to scroll my phone, heart hammering in my chest. I'd rehearsed the opening line a dozen times, but in the end, it just came out flat. I know about Jason. She froze. Not dramatically. Not like in a movie. Just a pause. A blink too long. The rhythm of water and berries stopped and she set the colander down. Slowly. What? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. I looked up at her. I said I know. About Jason Barth. I know everything. Still, she didn't move. But her throat tightened. I saw it. You really want to do this right now? She asked without turning. I gave a short laugh, dry bitter. Oh, that's good. That's your move? Like I'm the one being unreasonable. She turned finally, arms crossed, chin tilted slightly. You went through my stuff. I held her gaze. Yeah, I did. After you lied to my face, gaslit me for months, and brought someone into our house. She looked away for a moment, biting her lip like she was thinking of something to say. Then came the pivot. The defense turned offense. I only lied because I couldn't talk to you anymore, Trevor, she snapped. You've been checked out for a year. You're married to your work, not me. What did you expect me to do, just sit around and wait for you to remember I exist? There it was. I stared at her, stunned. So it's my fault you cheated on me? I'm saying it's complicated, she said, her voice rising. I tried, Trevor. You think you're this perfect husband? You don't even notice when I'm in the room half the time. That's not true, I said, trying to stay level. Don't turn this into some sad little script where you're the victim. Her eyes flashed. I'm not turning anything into anything. You're the one digging through my emails like some stalker. I laughed one sharp, disbelieving breath. You brought him into our house. Onto our couch. You took photos in front of our fireplace. While lying to me. She didn't deny it. I was lonely, she said finally, tears in her eyes now, but I didn't trust them. Jason listened. He didn't make me feel invisible. And that justified lying to me every single day? I said. Sneaking around. Faking business trips. Using our money to book hotels with someone else. Jenna's face hardened. You don't get to play the saint here. You've been controlling for years. That caught me off guard. Controlling? Yeah, she said, voice trembling but sharp. You act like you're some calm, reasonable guy, but you always have to be in charge. You decide when we talk, what we do, where we go. You think just because you're not yelling, it's not control. But it is. I was stunned. Not because it hurt, though it did, but because it felt rehearsed. Like she had the speech tucked away, ready for the moment she got caught. She needed me to be the bad guy so she wouldn't have to be. I took a step back. This is pathetic. She wiped at her eyes angrily. I already filed. That stopped me cold. What? Jenna crossed her arms again, defensive and shaking. I filed for divorce on Friday. You'll get served this week. I stared at her, trying to process. You filed. Before I said anything, she nodded. Because I knew where this was going. I knew you were digging. I saw you open my laptop. I knew you'd find it eventually. Unbelievable. I muttered. You blow up our marriage and then try to make it look like you're the one escaping something. She didn't say anything. Then I realized she wasn't just flipping the narrative emotionally. She was planning something worse. I found out 3 days later what it was. A letter arrived from her attorney. A formal packet, stapled and precise, accusing me of financial misconduct. Claims that I'd been using joint accounts for personal business deals, rerouting studio profits into hidden reserves, manipulating tax deductions without her consent. It was fiction. Wild, detailed fiction, but effective. The moment I read the line, pattern of deceptive financial behavior, I knew what this was. She wasn't just divorcing me. She was building a case to take everything with her. Thankfully, I wasn't unprepared. Brenton, my attorney, had anticipated this exact play. They always try to flip the power dynamic, he told me. They cheat, then claim abuse. They lie, then accuse you of secrecy. It's classic. But that's why we're documenting everything. He wasn't kidding. I'd been sending him files all week. Email logs, timestamps, account data, synced calendars, even video clips from our Ring camera showing when she'd left and returned on so-called work trips. Jenna had underestimated me. Brenton brought in a forensic accountant to go through every cent of our shared finances. And not only did it prove my innocence, it exposed hers. There were flights charged to her personal card but later reimbursed through our joint account. Gifts labeled client dinners that matched the dates and times of her email threads with Jason. Hotel charges on weekends she claimed were spent at wellness retreats. Every fake receipt, every team lunch, every shady transfer, caught. And with that, the momentum shifted. Suddenly Jenna was on defense. Her attorney stopped pushing the abuse angle and pivoted toward a "we just want peace" narrative. But I didn't let up. I wasn't out for revenge. But I wasn't going to let her rewrite our history and paint me as a villain in the story of her infidelity. A week later, we met for mediation. She showed up in all black, like she was in mourning. I wore a button-down and kept my face neutral. Her lawyer did most of the talking, offering a generous split of assets if I just agree not to pursue fault-based grounds. Brenton leaned in and asked if I wanted to respond. I nodded. Then I opened my laptop, slid it across the table, and pressed play. It was a screen-recording video 5 minutes long. It scrolled through her emails with Jason, the fireplace photo, the hotel itinerary, the wine glass with her lipstick on it. Jenna stared at the screen with her hands in her lap. No tears this time, just silence. When the video ended, I looked her straight in the eye. I have no interest in destroying you, I said quietly. But I won't let you destroy me either. She nodded once. That was it. By the end of that week, her lawyer backed off the accusations. She withdrew the financial claims. The new terms gave me full ownership of the studio and our primary residence. She took her personal belongings, her car, and a smaller share than she'd asked for. She didn't fight it. I think by then, she was just hoping to get out with some dignity left. But dignity doesn't survive deception. It evaporates the moment you choose betrayal over honesty. The day she moved out, I watched from the front porch as the movers loaded the last of her boxes into the truck. She glanced at me once, offered a small wave that I didn't return. She got into her car and drove off. No final words. Just the low hum of her engine disappearing down the street we used to walk together every night. And just like that, she was gone. But I wasn't broken. Not anymore. The house was too quiet once she left. It's funny, when you're living in dysfunction, you don't realize how much noise it makes. Even silence has texture. The passive-aggressive sighs, the clinking of dishes done without joy, the tension in the air like static. When all of that disappears, what's left isn't peace. Not at first. It's the kind of quiet that feels like an abandoned theater after the show ended without applause. The first night I was alone, I couldn't sleep in the bedroom. The sheets smelled like her shampoo. Her side of the closet was empty, but I kept looking over, expecting to see her robe draped on the door. Instead, I crashed on the studio couch with a bottle of whiskey and a folder of old notes I hadn't touched in years. Concepts from when Steven and I used to run the place together, before everything changed. before Jenna convinced me that I didn't need him. She never said it outright, of course. It was subtle. Don't you think he's holding you back? I feel like you do all the work and he just collects a check. She sowed the seeds over time and I let them take root. Eventually, I bought him out, an exit that, at the time, felt like freedom. But now, it just felt like a scar. A few days after the final papers were signed, I found myself scrolling through old contacts, thumb hovering over names I hadn't called in years. That's when I saw it, Stephen Ross Sell. No nickname, no emojis, just his name in all caps, like it had been waiting for this moment. I called him before I could second-guess it. He picked up on the third ring. Trevor. His voice hadn't changed. Calm, steady, like a metronome for my nerves. Hey man, I wasn't sure if this number still worked. It does. Wow. I didn't think I'd hear from you again. Yeah, well, it's been a year. Longer, he said, then paused. How are you? It was a deceptively simple question. I didn't know how to answer it. I wasn't okay, but I wasn't broken either. Somewhere in between. I could use a drink, I said finally. He didn't hesitate. Same place as always? We met at a bar we used to call the booth office, because that's where half our big decisions were made. Branding, hires, gear purchases. It was a small dive just off South Congress, with busted vinyl seats and the best bourbon in Austin. Stephen was already there when I walked in, nursing an old-fashioned. He stood up when he saw me and we hugged. A real one. No awkward slaps, no forced smiles. Good to see you, he said. You too. Been a minute. We sat down and after a few pleasantries and updates, he was still freelancing, mostly podcast work. I told him everything. Not just about the divorce, but how the business had drifted off course. How Jenna's version of our brand was polished, yes, but also sterile. We stopped creating and started catering. Safe clients, safe content. High-paying, low-risk work that paid bills but starved the soul. Stephen nodded, listening the way he always did. Sounds like you're ready for a reboot, he said. I'm past ready, I said. I just don't want to do it alone again. He didn't answer right away. Just stared into his drink like it might reveal the future. You burned me, Trev, he said finally. But I think you know that. I do. And the only reason I'm here now is because I believed in what we built. Before it got hijacked. I nodded. I want to go back to that. But better. Smarter. He leaned back, gave me a long look. Then he extended his hand. Then let's build it. We didn't even clink glasses. Just drank to the unspoken truth. The past was ugly, but the future didn't have to be. In the weeks that followed, everything moved fast. We gutted the studio, physically and metaphorically. Repainted the walls, tore down Jenna's framed brand slogan, Sound That Moves, and replaced it with a simple neon sign. Speak freely. We reached out to past clients, the indie filmmakers, the true crime podcasters, the spoken word poets who used to work with us before the corporate pivot. Some had moved on. Others were thrilled to hear from us. One even said, about damn time, and booked a full series on the spot. We designed a new business model. One that focused on narrative audio, full-service production for artists and authors who couldn't afford big agencies but still had stories worth telling. No templates, no fluff, just real work with real people. It was like breathing again after being underwater for too long. And we didn't stop at the studio. We launched a grant program. Something I'd always wanted to do but never had the guts to pitch when Jenna controlled the finances. We called it the Mic Drop Fund, a quarterly award for up-and-coming voice artists, especially those from marginalized communities. Winners got a cash stipend, studio time, and one-on-one mentorship. That's how I met Lily. She was our first grant recipient, an audio engineer with a theater background and the sharpest ear I'd ever encountered. In her application, she'd written, "Everyone wants to speak louder. I want to help them be heard clearer." I knew right then we were hiring her. She joined the team 2 weeks later and instantly became the backbone of the new space. Quiet, hyper-focused, and never afraid to tell me when a take us asterisk kid. We clicked professionally. At first, that's all it was. But some connections don't stay in the lines, no matter how hard you try. One night, She stayed late mixing a project. I brought her a burrito and we ended up sitting on the floor, talking about everything. Her time in community theater, the band she almost joined, her love of bad sci-fi audiobooks. I told her about Jenna, not in detail, just enough to explain the sadness that sometimes showed up on my face when no one asked for it. She didn't pity me. She didn't try to fix anything. She just said, "Yeah, that kind of thing leaves echoes." We sat in silence after that, the hum of the soundboard filling the space between us. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just rebuilding a business. I was rebuilding myself, not with new walls but with stronger ones. Meanwhile, Jenna's world was unraveling. I never reached out, never gloated, but I heard things. Austin's creative scene isn't that big. Word got out about her and Jason. He was married, apparently, to someone much less forgiving than I'd been. His wife made it public, emails, receipts, the whole scandal, and his firm dropped him. Jenna's company launched an internal ethics investigation and put her on leave. Eventually, she was let go due to breach of professional conduct. Poetic in a way, but I didn't feel good about it. Just detached. Jenna had made her choices. So had I. Now, my days start with coffee brewed in silence. Not the heavy kind from before, but the peaceful kind. I bike to the studio most mornings, take the long route through Bolden Creek. I keep a whiteboard on the office wall with 2 columns. Past and next. The past holds everything I've lived through. The next, that's still being written. The scars are still there. I won't pretend otherwise. But for the first time in a long time, I don't flinch when I look in the mirror. I see someone who lost almost everything and found what actually mattered.